Hey guys, so you ready for today's March 7th, 2024, 12:34 p.m. Central Time. Palestinian refugees rejected by Arab nations. They're actually being rejected by everybody, except here in the United States, of course. If you are anyone from any country with any background, come on in. Beside the point. There's an article I'm going to go over that James sent me the other day that was absolutely worth the read. It had quotes in it and statistics and stats, history, blah, 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 versus some journalist's opinion or even worse, interpretation of something. So, but like I said in a few videos back, couldn't tell you the title, but it has to do with Israel and Gaza war. I specifically stated Palestinians are tainted. They are a problem, is what I said, because there's no daylight between a Palestinian and Hamas. And the Arab nations basically agree. Because, give you minor history before I go into the article, Hamas came into power in 2007 after they kicked out the current government, and they've been in power ever since. They have tainted an entire generation of Palestinians. In fact, if you paid attention at all to any type of footage, photos, or otherwise of what happened on October 7th, you will realize that's the generation that actually caused the problem. So obviously, everyone is an issue in Gaza. Here's the article. It was kind of the way the Arab nations' description, if you will, was very PC. But anyway, I'll move on. It's a Fox News article. It's got a goofy title. World UN signal, no exit for civilians caught up in Gaza war. Quote, politically toxic. Palestinians are the only people in the world where relocation is not even considered. So, I'm going to skip around on this article a little bit. It says in Syria, during 13 years of civil war, more than 12 million forcibly displaced civilians managed to leave the war-torn country, resettling in the region and beyond. In Afghanistan, where the radical Islamist Taliban group returned to power in 2021, thank you, Biden, more than 2.6 million people are now spread across the globe. With that being said, if the Taliban stays in power, which, by the way, they were in power before we went into Afghanistan, stays in power for a long period of time, all those Afghans that grow up, the next generation, will also become a big motherfucking problem. And considering there's other people, or I should say other terrorist groups that are starting to resurge big time in Afghanistan, because that's just a melting pot of idiots, that's going to be a problem. So everyone in Afghanistan, if you are somehow catching this video, get the fuck out now, because you will be rejected by everyone as well. And then it says, here we go. Let's see, mere location, blah, blah. The mere suggestion of relocating these desperate men, women, and children, even temporarily, just a few miles beyond the borders of Palestine enclave, has been sharply criticized and quickly dismissed. Who are they talking about? They're talking about Egypt. It says, in fact, Egypt, which borders the Strip to the south. Yes, they border Gaza, not Israel. That part. Has bolstered its border fence and deployed additional troops in the event Palestinians search for respite and aid might attempt to enter into its territory. Then, in Europe, Thomas Corbett Dillon, a US-based political commentator and former advisor to British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, said there's unwillingness to provide refuge to Gazan citizens was mainly due to the past waves of refugees and migrants. Quote, particularly Muslims who have failed to assimilate into our culture. The European appetite for accepting refugees is over. Constantly shows the vast majority do not want any more refugees. End quote. Then he goes on to saying Europe is struggling, blah. The Arab states, the refusal even discuss offering Palestinians from Gaza refuge is more personal. The guy who's talking here is Hussein Abdul Hussein, a research fellow at the Foundation of Defense and Democracies. Quote, the Palestinian record in Arab countries has not been one of behaving guests, which has made Arab countries reluctant to take in any number of them from Gaza. He noted that the Palestinians relocating to Arab countries in the past has created friction and even sparked conflict, such as in Jordan, where Palestinian armed factions tried to topple the government, or Lebanon, where Palestinian terrorists, I like how they say Palestinian terrorists, drew Israel into multiple wars, and they're talking about with them. It says, in addition, he said that most Arab leaders, it would be, quote, politically toxic to urge Palestinians to leave the coastal enclave, even if it meant sparing their lives. And this goes into how the sentiment over there for anti-Israel is what they're using, as far as I'm concerned, as an example, because as they go on to say in this article, no Arab official wants to be seen as the one who called on Palestinians to surrender their territory to the Israeli army. Prioritizing land over good life for Palestinians has been at the heart of the problem and the Palestinian misery. So that's exactly what they're saying. They want the Palestinians to prevail over Israel, is what he said. That's why they're claiming they don't want these people to leave. They don't want them to leave, period, end of story. They want them to keep their territory, which is bullshit. Because as far as I'm concerned, and from what I've even heard from Israel, and honestly, logic, Israel probably wants nothing to do with fucking Gaza. Because there are a lot of Palestinians sitting there that are in existence, if you will see these camps, okay? There are like 1 point something million Palestinians that have left and fled North Gaza to South Gaza, and Rafah, which is where they're going into now, and they exist. And Israel likely doesn't want to have to deal with them at all, period. And trying to kick out Hamas to the degree, they want to kick out the leadership, the problem, the military aspect of Hamas, but Hamas actually controls the government there, meaning, everything, the news, the aid, every aspect of Gaza is run by Hamas. So, kicking out the military faction, as far as I'm concerned, is one concept, but they're still going to have that area run by somebody who's, quote, neutral of Hamas. They want nothing to do with the Palestinians. Guaranteed, they want nothing to do with them. He says, quote, getting Palestinians out of harm's way weakens the position of Hamas and allows a quicker Israel victory. The international community deals with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict along the lines of a theoretical framework that is devoid of reality, suggesting that the solution is territory, regardless of the interest of Palestinians. And it says, the globe model is inefficient, perpetuates the conflict, including making hereditary Palestinians refugee status. End quote. And then it goes on to say, I'll skip some of this stuff. We'll skip that. He said the UN seems unwilling to impose such a decision on Egypt, making Egypt to take them. He said, noting that the international body has also held back from pressuring Hamas into surrendering. Another way that could spare further Gazan Israeli deaths. The only pressure the UN decided to apply is on Israel. If that's not bias, I don't know what is, he said. Now, when Fox News asked UNRWA, has it considered or discussed assisting Gazans who might want to leave the Strip even temporarily for the duration of the fighting, Juliette Touma, the agency's director of communications, responded sharply with one sentence. Quote, we are not taking part in forced displacement. End quote. Which is ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And Egypt could easily, and I'm not saying Egypt should by any means. I don't think anybody should be doing this. But Egypt could easily back up a little bit into their area and put a new fence, if you will, to allow these people to have a temporary camp, okay? And then once everything kind of settles, the dust settles, whatever you want to call it, in Gaza, they could easily be forced by Egypt to go back to Gaza, very simplistically. But Egypt doesn't want that fucking responsibility, and their leadership has basically come out and stated, Palestinians are a goddamn problem, and we don't want anything to do with them. Period. And they've even said it on X. It's really amusing. So then it says, let's see. Today, it works with more than 5.9 million Palestinian refugees, descendants of original group in Jordan, Lebanon, Syria, as well as the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and the war-ravaged Gaza Strip. But obviously, they refuse to help them be displaced, as they put it. And it does say here about Canada. Where is it? Blah, 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 blah. This jackass, where's his name? Jeremy Kondyandaka, I have no idea how to say that, president of the U.S.-based Refugee International, did say the world has a legal obligation under international law to protect Palestinian civilians from forced displacement, indiscriminate harm, collective punishment, and atrocity crimes. He goes on to say, no country in the region wants to be seen as facilitating ethnic cleansing, which would be the perception to many countries. The goal of providing refuge for people fleeing extreme violence should not be a permanent relocation, but provide temporary protection until the conflict ends. And then this is the most ridiculous statement this jackass said. There is very little trust the Israeli government would eventually allow displaced Palestinians to return to Gaza. Hence the lack of enthusiasm for taking in Palestinian refugees from this conflict. And then Israel obviously went on and said, they could easily go into Egypt. We don't control that border. They could come and go as much as they fucking want. Where the hell is the Canadian thing? We're going to search for it. Because some people... I spelled Canada wrong. Canada. There we go. The official pointed that around 1,000 Gazans with relatives in Canada who were recently given safe haven there and are already starting a new life. And the government official from Israel said more countries could offer that help in Gaza, but instead the majority will stay there, with the world stopping them from leaving, said the government official, who also rejects claims refugees from the Strip would not eventually be able to return to the war once the war has ended. Interesting article because it really states how Palestinians are viewed. And how important they are. They're not important to the rest of the world. They're not. And Arab nations have had problems with them before. If Palestinians moved into Jordan like they did and tried to topple the motherfucking government, yeah, as an Arab nation, Arab country, whichever you choose to call it, I would say get the fuck away from my area. I would not be taking you in. There is absolutely no daylight between the Palestinian and Hamas. They are all terrorists. I don't care what anybody says. Period. End of story. It's very interesting that the Arab nations are trying to say this is going to be politically toxic, basically saying forced displacement of giving up their territory to Israel. That's an interesting excuse. But we all know why they don't fucking want them. They're a problem. This is Are You Ready For It? Take care, guys. Have a great day.